What is the meaning of this, brother?
I don't know what to do.
It's simple. Say, I do.
Where is she? I can't believe she showed up in that dress.
He looks so uncomfortable.
The wedding day arrived quietly, as if the world itself was holding its breath. From far away the place looked beautiful. White cloth hung from wooden arches. Rows of flowers lined the path. Candles glowed softly in the morning light. Everything appeared perfect, arranged with care and patience. Yet something felt wrong the moment anyone stepped closer. The air was heavy. Not warm. Not calm. Heavy, like an unseen weight pressing down on every breath. A cold wind moved through the space, though the sun was high. It slipped between guests, brushed against bare arms, and stayed there. People shivered without knowing why. The trees stood still. No birds sang from their branches. Not one. The silence felt unnatural, as if sound itself had chosen to stay away. Guests gathered slowly, their footsteps softer than usual. Conversation stayed low, careful. Smiles appeared, but they did not reach the eyes. Some guests glanced over their shoulders again and again, uneasy, unable to explain the tight feeling in their chests. This wedding was missing something. No, someone. The woman who was meant to stand at the altar was not there. No one spoke her name out loud, yet her absence filled the space more strongly than any presence. It lingered in the corners, clung to the shadows, rested in the pauses between breaths. Candles flickered without wind. One suddenly went out, releasing a thin line of smoke that twisted upward like a warning. Nearby, a mirror placed for decoration cracked down the center with a sharp, quiet sound. Guests froze. No one had touched it. Flowers began to wilt before the ceremony even started. White petals curled inward, losing their brightness as if joy had been drained from them. A few guests noticed and quickly looked away, their hearts pounding. Then a bell rang. Once, twice. The rope had not moved. A chill passed through the crowd. At the altar stood the groom. His suit was perfect, his posture straight, but his face told another story. His skin looked pale, almost gray. His eyes moved often, shifting from the guests to the trees, then back to the empty space beside him. He looked like a man waiting for judgment. Beside him stood the bride. She was the sister. Her beauty was sharp and striking, polished with care. Every movement was controlled. Every smile was practiced. She stood tall, chin lifted, eyes forward. But her hands trembled slightly as they rested together, fingers pressing too tightly. She was not glowing. She was alert, as if she expected something to happen, and feared it would. The wind grew colder. Candles bent low, their flames stretching sideways. Shadows lengthened across the ground, darker than they should have been under the morning sun. Guests whispered among themselves. Some spoke of bad luck. Others mentioned old stories their grandparents once told, stories about broken vows and stolen lives. The elders exchanged quiet looks, filled with understanding and concern. They had seen signs like this before. This was not a celebration. It was a reckoning. The air felt crowded, though no one new had arrived. The space between people seemed smaller, tighter, as if unseen figures were stepping closer. A few guests felt cold fingers brush their arms. Others heard faint sounds, soft cries, distant sighs, gone the moment they turned to look. The wedding felt cursed. Not by chance, but by choice. Somewhere beyond sight, forces were gathering. They moved without sound, without shape, drawn by injustice and pain left unanswered. They were not here to bless love. They were here because something precious had been taken, and they had come to remember. They had grown up under the same roof, but their lives had never been the same. The older sister carried gentleness in every gesture. Her hands were always ready to help, her voice soft when someone was hurting, her patience endless. She learned early that love meant giving, forgiving, and staying even when the world felt heavy. She held herself steady through storms, her heart wide and open, trusting that kindness would always return in some form. The younger sister learned differently. She learned the weight of being overlooked. When the older sister received praise, she received attention, hugs, and small gifts. The younger felt invisible. When the older succeeded, the room glowed with pride. When she stumbled, warmth and reassurance surrounded her sister. And the younger sister? She learned to swallow her disappointment, to smile quietly, and to let envy take root deep inside. She loved her sister, yes, but she also resented her. Their parents never intended to divide them, but small actions carved invisible lines. A longer look at one, a softer word for the other, subtle moments that taught one sister she was safe and loved, and the other that she must fight silently to matter. The older sister carried resilience like a quiet flame. The younger carried hunger. And then the groom arrived in their lives. He was kind and steady, the kind of man whose presence made the world feel safer. He noticed the older sister in ways no one else had. He listened when she spoke, laughed with her when she was joyful, offered comfort without expectation. With him she felt chosen, not because she demanded it but because he saw her worth. Her laughter became brighter. Her eyes began to shine. She walked with a quiet confidence that drew people to her without effort. She bloomed in a world that had often ignored her. The younger sister noticed everything. She watched the way her sister's smile reached others. She watched the way the groom's attention lingered longer on her sister's face. She watched the warmth she herself had longed for surround someone else. And she wanted it. Not just the man. Not just his love. But the feeling he gave her sister. Validation. Safety. Proof that she was enough. She craved it like air. She wanted it so badly she could taste it in every glance, every laugh, every gentle touch her sister received. But no one else could see the quiet fire growing inside her. It stayed hidden, quiet, waiting, patient, calculating. The younger sister learned early that to get what she wanted, she must wait for the perfect moment. She learned to mask desire with smiles, to cover longing with jokes, to let envy fester like a shadow that moved behind every decision. The older sister, meanwhile, remained unsuspecting. She loved with her whole heart, trusting people as she always had. To her, family meant loyalty. Love meant patience. Life was built on kindness and the belief that good intentions would be returned. She never guessed that the hunger in her sister's heart could tip the scales of fate. Childhood had already planted seeds of rivalry, silent yet deep. Each act of favoritism, each glance or word, had built walls that the older sister could not see, and traps she could not avoid. One sister thrived in love's warmth. The other learned to covet it, quietly, with calculated restraint. And when the older sister's heart finally opened to love, when she believed, finally, that she had found safety, warmth, and a future, it was already shadowed by another's desire. A desire that had been growing for years. A desire that would not be denied. The engagement felt like sunlight after a long winter. The older sister's life had always carried quiet shadows, but now, for the first time, she believed she could step into warmth without fear. Every plan she made with the groom, every laugh they shared over small details of the wedding, every gentle touch across the table, it felt like proof that love could be simple, honest, and safe. She felt chosen. See, enough. Wedding preparations became more than tasks. They became symbols of hope. Each flower she picked reminded her that she could nurture something beautiful. Every fabric swatch, carefully examined, whispered that she could create a life of her own design. The world was soft around her for the first time and she breathed it in like air. The younger sister inserted herself into the plans almost immediately. She offered help with the flowers, with seating arrangements, even with the cake. At first it seemed harmless. She smiled as she carried ribbons and pinched fabric, her hands trembling slightly with excitement, or perhaps something else. But soon her presence became too heavy, too precise. She lingered in corners where she did not belong, correcting small choices the older sister had already made. She spent long, quiet hours alone with the groom under the pretense of planning, her eyes sharper than they should have been, her smiles holding meanings the older sister could not read. The older sister noticed the lingering glances, the private conversations that seemed unnecessary, but she chose to trust. Trust had always been her nature. She believed in the goodness of people. She believed in her sister. She believed in love. And so she dismissed the subtle warnings her instincts whispered. There was a contrast she could feel, though not yet name. The groom's attention was warm and steady toward her. Every touch, every laugh, every glance carried sincerity. And beside it, the sister's gaze was sharp, deliberate, calculating. She smiled at the groom when she thought no one watched, and her eyes flicked toward the older sister with something dark, something wanting. Still, the older sister trusted. She always trusted. The days passed, filled with careful planning and small joys. Each night, she lay awake imagining her future. A small house filled with warmth, children laughing, a life built on safety and love. And she believed it would come. But there was an unease she could not shake. A soft tremor beneath the surface. Something precious felt fragile. Not in the big, obvious ways, nothing she could point to, but in the quiet spaces between smiles, in the way the younger sister's laughter sometimes went too long, in the way the groom sometimes glanced at her with the faintest shadow of worry. The first cracks had appeared, silent and nearly invisible, but they were there. They whispered that love was not only about trust. It was also about vigilance. about seeing beyond appearances, yet she chose to ignore them. She believed in the safety of love. She believed in the honesty of those around her. She believed, above all, that her heart would not be stolen. And in that belief, she let the first seeds of betrayal grow quietly, unnoticed, until they were already tangled deep in the roots of her life. A shadow was settling over what should have been her brightest time. And the older sister, still smiling, still trusting, did not see it. Not yet. The night did not arrive with fire or thunder. It came quietly, almost gently, like a shadow sliding across the floor. The older sister thought the world was still safe. She thought the warmth she had built, the trust she had given, would carry her through. She believed in honesty, in love, and family. She was wrong. The truth revealed itself slowly, painfully, in pieces she could not unsee. A message found on a forgotten phone. A glimpse of a private glance. Laughter in the hallway that sounded too intimate, too familiar. A door closed too quietly. Each small sign whispered a story she did not want to hear and yet could not ignore. It did not strike her all at once. There was no confrontation, no shout, no immediate explosion of fury. Betrayal is crueler when it grows silently, knotting itself inside the chest until it presses so hard that breathing becomes impossible. She pieced it together in fragments. Each piece confirmed the worst fear she had not dared to name. Her groom, the man she had trusted above all else, had given his heart to the one she had loved like a sister. The younger sister, whose envy had been quiet and hidden, had acted with patience, with strategy, with an appetite that had waited for the perfect moment. The plan had been silent, nearly invisible. And now it had succeeded. The older sister did not scream. She did not cry. Her hands shook, but her face remained calm, pale as paper. Inside her chest felt hollow. Her world had cracked silently, leaving her standing in a quiet ruin. Every memory of love, every plan, every hope felt suddenly worthless. The younger sister smiled softly when she realized she had won. She called it fate, she called it true love. She called it destiny. The groom? He called it confusion. Neither of them called it betrayal. Family and friends noticed something was wrong, but they did not understand the depth. Some suggested forgiveness, some suggested forgetting, some urged moving on. No one asked the older sister how it felt to have her life stolen from under her, how it felt to be erased. And she did not answer. She did not cry. She did not scream. She walked away. Not in anger. Not with dramatic confrontation. She walked in silence, carrying the weight of everything in her chest. She carried it like a fragile vase filled with shattered glass, each step deliberate, careful, refusing to let the pieces cut her too deeply as she moved away from everything she had loved. The silence followed her. It followed her home. It followed her through the streets. It followed her into the darkened rooms of her life, where laughter no longer reached and the walls were lined with absence. Her family tried to reach her. She avoided them. Friends called her name, she did not answer. The world she had built, the love she had nurtured, the trust she had given freely, all of it had collapsed quietly and no one could rebuild it. And in the quiet she understood something else. The betrayal had not been just about love. It had been about power. About control. About who had the right to be seen, to be chosen, to exist in the warmth of attention. The older sister understood, in that hollow, silent moment, that she had been invisible to those who mattered most. And yet, even in that darkness, she carried herself with dignity. She walked away not in anger but in heartbreak. Not in fury but in quiet sorrow. The night ended, but she did not return. The life she had known, filled with laughter, hope, and trust, had ended with it. And from that night forward, she would exist in the world as someone removed, someone unseen, someone unclaimed by the lives she had once believed would shelter her. The betrayal had won in form, but it had not yet touched what could not be broken. Her spirit, her essence, the silent fire that no one could steal. She was alone. Completely. And yet she still breathed. Life shrank around her, becoming smaller with every passing day. The older sister moved through the world as if it had forgotten she existed. Friends stopped calling. Family stopped asking. Even familiar places, the streets she had walked 1,000 times, felt empty, hollowed of warmth. Every smile she once received now passed her by, as if she were a ghost wandering among the living. Her reflection in mirrors became a stranger. She did not recognize the tired eyes, the hollow cheeks, the way her shoulders had begun to slump under weight no one could see. Every morning she forced herself to rise, forcing steps that felt heavier with each attempt, forcing a life that no longer belonged to her. Whispers began to haunt her. At first she thought it was imagination. Faint voices, soft and murmuring, brushing past her in empty rooms. Names she had not heard for years. Warnings she did not understand. Faces flashed in dreams, ancestors, women she did not know, yet whose pain mirrored her own. Symbols appeared in her thoughts, over and over, broken rings, water moving in strange patterns, fire dancing without flame. Each one a question. Each one a warning. Her grief settled in her body. Sleep slipped away like sand through her fingers. Food lost its flavor. Her hands shook with exhaustion, her chest ached with a sorrow too deep for words. The world moved on around her, indifferent. And she became smaller within it, until she was invisible even to herself. One day she simply left. No goodbyes. No announcement. No traces. She walked away from everything that had once defined her, carrying nothing but the quiet, raw ache of loss. And the world noticed. Storms rose in her absence. Dark clouds gathered over the places she had loved, heavy and restless. Animals fled fields where she once walked. Trees bent as though mourning her departure, their branches twisting in grief. The wind carried her name, though no one spoke it. Even the sun seemed to hesitate in the sky, as if it too mourned her leaving. She did not return. Not that anyone could tell. The people she had known searched for her at first, then stopped, unsure whether she had truly gone or simply vanished into the shadows of the world. And yet she was not gone. Not entirely. She existed in the spaces between. In the corners of empty rooms. In the whispers at dusk. In the gentle rustle of leaves where no wind blew. She had crossed a threshold. Somewhere between life and the unknown, she had stepped into a world that observed the living, that remembered injustices, that never let betrayal fade quietly. And in that silence, in that invisible presence, the first stirrings of something greater began. A power born of heartbreak. A quiet force shaped by pain, by love taken, by trust shattered. It did not cry. It did not scream. It waited. It gathered. Remembered. And somewhere deep inside she felt it too. The truth that the world had failed her, that the lives she had loved had betrayed her, that the injustice done to her could not be erased. She was gone from their sight, but she had not disappeared from fate. She had become a presence that would not be ignored. The shadows leaned closer. The wind whispered. And the world waited, unknowingly, for the reckoning that would come. Her absence was permanent. But it was not the end. The day had come again. The altar was set, the flowers arranged, the candles flickering in careful rows. White fabric waved gently in the wind, and the space looked, at first glance, like every dream a bride could have imagined. But the air was heavy, thick with unease. Something invisible pressed down on the gathered crowd, tightening the chest, chilling the skin, settling in the bones. The younger sister stood there, dressed in white. Her veil framed her face like a halo, but the halo felt brittle, like glass ready to shatter. Her beauty remained undeniable, but beneath the polished exterior, fear coiled like a snake. She lifted her chin, forced a smile, but her eyes darted again and again toward the empty space beside the altar, the space that should have held her sister. The groom shifted nervously at her side. The warmth and confidence he had once carried now wavered. He felt it, the weight, the gaze of something unseen. He glanced around, trying to find the source of his sudden, sinking dread. Something in the air pressed against him, whispered in silence, and he could not shake the feeling that he was being watched, not by eyes but by souls. Guests murmured quietly to each other, their voices tinged with fear. Fingers brushed against each other in nervous reassurance. Children looked toward the shadows and cried softly, though no one was near them. Candles flickered violently for no reason, throwing the hall into alternating pools of light and darkness. A sudden chill passed through the crowd, as if a storm had entered silently, without clouds or wind. Elders exchanged glances filled with understanding. They had seen signs like this before. Tales from their youth returned in whispers, stories of wronged women, of promises broken, of spirits who never left when justice was denied. They murmured warnings quietly, too soft for most to hear, but their eyes scanned the altar and the empty space beside it with recognition. The younger sister tried to focus on the ceremony. She lifted her hands, adjusted her veil, smiled at the groom. But inside, a tremor ran through her chest. She felt it, the pressure of the unseen, the weight of the past, the reckoning that had not yet arrived. Her confidence faltered in ways she could not explain. The groom looked down at his hands, the tightness in his chest spreading. He tried to swallow, tried to straighten his shoulders, but the feeling of being watched would not leave him. He could not breathe freely, could not trust his own senses. There was a presence here that he could not name, something that did not forgive, did not forget. The ceremony continued. Guests prayed, whispered blessings, recited vows, but the air thickened with tension. Cold touches brushed along arms. Faint voices carried through the hall. Shadows moved where no lights fell. The space felt alive with memory, with sorrow, with judgment. The spirits had begun to arrive. They were not yet visible, not yet fully formed. But their presence pressed against every heart, every thought, every emotion. They whispered of injustice. They whispered of betrayal. They whispered of a life stolen too early, of love broken, of dignity erased. The wedding, meant to celebrate union and joy, had become a place of quiet reckoning. The younger sister's smile faltered. The groom's hands shook. Guests felt the tension, though they could not explain it. And above all, the empty space beside the altar seemed to grow heavier, as if someone, or something, was waiting to step in. The day of celebration had turned into a day of fear. A day of truth. A day that should have never been. The unseen forces pressed closer, their presence undeniable now, their gaze impossible to ignore. The wedding that should have been a moment of love and joy had become a gathering of shadows, of memories, of a justice long delayed. And those who had wronged the older sister would soon learn, nothing stolen ever remains hidden forever. The air grew heavier, thick with expectation. Guests shifted uncomfortably. The younger sister, now bride, could feel it deep in her chest, a pressure she could not name. The groom's eyes darted nervously, searching for answers that could not be seen. Something moved in the corners, in the shadows, in the spaces between the candles and the walls. And then they came. At first, subtle. A faint shimmer along the edges of mirrors. A whisper, carried without wind, brushing against ears, telling truths no one dared speak aloud. A fleeting silhouette, just out of focus, moving where no one should be. The older sister had returned, not in body but in presence. Her spirit stood among them, calm yet powerful, sorrowful yet undeniable. Her figure shimmered softly, a light tinged with sadness. She did not scream, she did not rage. She simply existed, a reminder of what had been stolen, of what had been broken. Other spirits appeared alongside her, women from generations past, their faces lined with grief and endurance. They had come for her, drawn by injustice, by betrayal, by the silent pain of a life erased. They carried the weight of countless wrongs, broken vows, stolen love, forgotten promises. They had come to witness, to reveal, to hold the guilty accountable. The younger sister gasped, the confidence she had relied on crumbling in an instant. Her polished exterior cracked. The eyes that once searched for approval now looked upon her own actions with terror, with recognition of what she had done. She saw, finally, the truth of her choices. No words could hide her deeds now. No excuses could erase what had been done. The groom trembled. His hands shook. He had tried to ignore, to justify, to hide behind confusion. But the spirits pressed closer, unseen yet undeniable. They carried the weight of his cowardice, the quiet betrayal of his silence. He had chosen convenience over courage, desire over loyalty, and now he could not escape the reckoning. Guests began to notice the changes, though they could not understand fully. Shadows flickered in candlelight. Mirrors reflected not just their own faces but the faces of the wronged, staring back with quiet accusation. Whispers rose, soft yet insistent, telling the story of stolen love, of broken hearts, of innocence betrayed. The wedding hall, once filled with decoration and false joy, became a stage for truth. Every gesture, every whispered secret, every stolen moment was laid bare in the eyes of the unseen. The younger sister stumbled, trying to smile, trying to explain, but her words dissolved into nothing. There was no defense, no charm, no trick left to mask the truth. The groom's knees buckled. He could not meet the older sister's gaze. He had failed her in life, and now he faced the unflinching judgment of her spirit. Shame and guilt pressed down on him like the weight of stone. The spirits did not act with vengeance. They did not strike. They did not hurt. They revealed. They illuminated. They held up the truth in its purest form, letting it fall into every mind, every heart, every soul present. The younger sister cried silently, the sound small against the murmuring of the spirits. She had taken what was not hers. She had crossed a line that no charm or manipulation could repair. And now she had nowhere to hide. The groom sank to the floor, overwhelmed by the enormity of what had been done, what he had allowed, what he had ignored. And the older sister, standing amidst the gathered spirits, radiated a quiet strength. She did not lash out. She did not demand. She did not speak. She simply held her dignity, her sorrow, and her justice in perfect balance. The wedding collapsed, not with fire or chaos but with revelation. The celebration ended. The laughter ceased. The decorations remained, but they were hollow. The hall was full of presence, yet filled with absence. The truth had taken its place. And in that moment, everyone knew, the wrongs could not be hidden. Betrayal, no matter how cleverly concealed, would always return to light. The spirits gathered their quiet power, holding it as a mirror to all present. Those who had wronged could no longer ignore it. Those who had witnessed could no longer forget it. The reckoning was complete. And though no hand had struck, though no scream had echoed, justice had been delivered. The older sister's spirit did not leave the world in anger. She left it in truth. And in truth there was power. The hall grew quiet. The whispers faded. The shadows softened. The weight that had pressed against every chest lifted, not entirely but enough to let the air breathe again. The spirits remained, but they were no longer heavy or threatening. They were steady, serene, full of purpose. They had revealed the truth, illuminated the betrayal, and held the guilty accountable. Their work was done. The older sister's spirit stepped forward, calm and radiant. She did not lash out. She did not demand revenge. She did not seek punishment. She had not come for blood or to bring ruin. She had come for herself, for her dignity, for the quiet balance of justice that had long been denied. She looked upon her sister, now a bride, and the weight in her gaze was soft but undeniable. The younger sister no longer needed explanation. She understood, in the deepest part of herself, the cost of her actions. Her victories had been hollow. Her beauty, her cleverness, her schemes, they were meaningless now, reflected in the unshakable presence of what she had wronged. The groom knelt, not in reverence, not in prayer, but in acknowledgement. He had failed. He had chosen convenience over courage, desire over loyalty, silence over truth. And now, the gravity of his moral cowardice pressed against him like a tide he could not escape. And yet, the older sister did not hold anger in her eyes. She held something stronger, peace. She forgave, not to absolve them, not to erase what had been done, but to release herself. To reclaim the life, the spirit, the dignity that betrayal had tried to steal. Forgiveness, she understood, was not reconciliation. It was freedom. Freedom from rage, from sorrow, from the quiet chains of loss. Her gaze lifted to the gathered spirits. They shimmered softly around her, a circle of memory, sorrow, and strength. They had come to guide, to reveal, and to remind the living that injustice cannot be hidden forever. And now, their work complete, they began to drift back into the spaces between worlds, leaving the hall calm but forever changed. The younger sister remained, trembling. She had been left with the knowledge of her own choices, the consequences that no one else could shield her from. Her life would continue, but never the same. Every smile she forced would carry the weight of what she had done. Every achievement would be shadowed by the memory of stolen trust and love. She had not been punished by violence, but by awareness, by recognition, by the truth she could not escape. The groom stood, hollowed by conscience. The life he thought he had won now felt empty, meaningless. The warmth he had relied upon was gone, replaced by the chilling understanding of what courage and integrity truly demanded. And the older sister, her spirit finally free, felt the release she had long sought. She moved forward, not into vengeance, not into bitterness, but into something new. A space untouched by betrayal. A place of peace. As she faded from sight, she left behind something more important than fear or retribution. She left behind the knowledge that even when the world betrays, even when hearts are broken and love is stolen, dignity, self-worth, and quiet justice endure. The hall remained still. The candles flickered softly. The air carried the faintest trace of warmth, as if the world itself had exhaled. Balance had returned. Not through violence, not through anger, but through truth, through awareness, through the reclamation of what had been lost. The spirits, and the older sister among them, had reminded the living. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is strength. It is release. It is the reclamation of power once stolen. And now that power was hers again. The days passed quietly, almost eerily. The younger sister, once radiant with the thrill of her stolen victory, moved through life with a shadow draped over her shoulders. Every decision, every smile, every achievement carried the weight of memory. The thrill of her conquest had vanished, replaced by an emptiness she could not fill. People watched her, admired her, even envied her success, but she felt hollow, haunted by the quiet knowledge that the life she had stolen had never truly been hers to claim. The groom's life too felt off balance. He had the trappings of happiness, an obedient partner, a home filled with appearances, but the core of his being had been shaken. Trust, once freely given, now seemed foreign. Every relationship, every success felt fragile, hollow, incomplete. He had survived the immediate consequences of his betrayal, but he could not escape the weight of truth. Every night, when silence fell, he felt the gaze of the wronged, the memory of what he had allowed, and the ghostly presence of a love he had abandoned. The older sister had become something more than a person. She existed in whispers, in stories told at dusk, in the cautious reverence of those who remembered. She was a caution, a warning, a comfort to those who had been wronged. Mothers spoke her name softly to daughters. Friends remembered her as someone who had endured, survived, and transcended betrayal. Her absence had left a mark on the world, yet her presence lingered in memory, in spirit, in truth. The younger sister occasionally glanced toward the spaces she once envied, sensing a presence she could not name. Every joy felt fleeting, every smile tinged with guilt. She could try to rebuild, to continue to live, but the knowledge of what she had taken would shadow her forever. Success was hers, but trust, love, and peace were not. The groom tried to bury his shame beneath busyness and achievement. He moved forward, made plans, tried to rebuild, but the hollow ache remained. Even those who had praised him in life could see it. A certain emptiness in his eyes, a subtle tension in his posture, a quiet unease that no wealth or power could disguise. The older sister's legend grew. Not through loud tales, but through quiet remembrance. People spoke of her with soft awe, the woman whose love had been stolen, whose life had been betrayed, yet whose dignity, resilience, and spirit had endured. She became a symbol, a reminder that love, trust, and loyalty are not possessions, but legacies that cannot be stolen without cost. And the world remembered. In hushed tones, the story carried its truth. Love stolen never truly belongs to the thief. Trust violated cannot be reclaimed easily. The hearts and lives touched by betrayal carry scars that last far longer than the moment of theft. The wedding that should never have been faded into memory, but its echoes remained. The lesson endured. Pain endured. And the older sister, in her quiet, unseen way, had become a guardian of that truth, a witness to the moral weight of actions, a keeper of balance that the living could neither ignore nor erase. In the end, life went on for those who remained, but it was never quite the same. The cost of stolen love was written not in drama or punishment, but in the quiet, enduring imbalance left in its wake. And everyone who had played a part in it, knowingly or unknowingly, felt the consequences, though differently, in ways that would shape the rest of their lives. Some losses could not be repaired. Some lessons could not be forgotten. Some spirits could not be silenced. And the older sister, though absent in form, remained present in memory, justice, and story. Time passed, slow and unyielding. Seasons changed and the world moved forward, but the echoes of what had occurred never truly faded. Some scars are invisible, carried only in memory, in heart, in spirit, and hers was one of them. The older sister, once betrayed, once unseen, had become more than human memory. She was a presence in the quiet corners of life, a lingering reminder that love is not simply possession, and that betrayal leaves more than pain, it leaves truth. Her story whispered through the wind, through the rustling leaves, through the quiet moments when people paused to feel, to remember, to reflect. Love, she understood, could transcend the acts of those who tried to steal it. Even when taken, even when betrayed, even when erased in the eyes of the living, it remained. It lived in memory. It lived in dignity. It lived in the quiet resilience of a heart that refused to be crushed. The younger sister continued her life, aware now of the weight she bore. Her choices had consequences not measured in punishment, but in awareness, in the subtle emptiness that touched every triumph, every smile, every claim to happiness. She had gained what she wanted, but she had lost what could never be reclaimed: innocence, trust, and the easy joy of love freely given and freely returned. The groom too carried the hollow truth. His life seemed complete on paper, yet he understood, with every quiet moment, that what he had abandoned could not be restored. The love he had relied upon, the trust he had neglected, the choices he had made, they haunted him in ways no apology or ambition could erase. And yet the older sister remained free. Not through revenge. Not through malice. Not through the fear she inspired. She had transcended the confines of betrayal, carrying herself into a space of dignity, peace, and truth. Forgiveness had not meant forgetting. It had meant reclaiming power, voice, and self-respect. It had meant being whole in a world that had tried to diminish her. The spirits who had gathered that day lingered still, softly, quietly. They were not there to terrify or punish, but to witness, to protect, to remind. Wronged hearts do not vanish entirely, they endure. They guide, they guard, they hold the moral balance steady. And the world, though it would continue to experience sorrow, betrayal, and loss, carried a quiet awareness that love rooted in deceit can never truly flourish, that hearts stolen can never truly be claimed, and that those who have been wronged are never completely powerless. The story ended not with a shout, not with a fire, not with vengeance, but with reflection, with memory, with the knowledge that what is taken may be visible in the world, but it cannot touch the inner truth of a heart that has survived. The final image lingered like a breath held in still air, a hall once filled with tension, now empty but calm, a garden once heavy with sorrow, now at peace, a spirit, radiant and unshakable, looking outward with quiet strength, letting go yet remaining eternal. Love had endured. Betrayal had passed. And the truth, the dignity, the memory of the wronged remained. In the end, hearts learned that even when stolen, love carries a legacy that cannot be destroyed. The older sister's spirit had become that legacy. And through her, the world remembered. Love, when rooted in truth, transcends betrayal, outlasts injustice, and endures beyond the reach of those who try to steal it. Peace returned, but not ignorance. Balance restored, but not forgetfulness. The world was forever changed, yet stronger, wiser, and haunted by a love that refused to die.